Herzlich willkommen zu deinem Lieblingspodcast, dem Bewohnerfrei-Podcast. Und egal, wo du das gerade hörst, heute kannst du wirklich alles stehen und liegen lassen, weil ich habe einen ganz besonderen Gast hier. Das Interview wird auf Englisch sein, weil die Bücher, die er geschrieben hat, kommen ursprünglich aus den Vereinigten Staaten und er ist ein Weltbestseller und hat die beiden Bücher geschrieben, Big Five for Life und das Café am Rande der Welt und auch noch Wiedersehen im Café am Rande der Welt. Ich habe alle dieser Bücher gelesen, sie sind in über 41 Sprachen übersetzt. I'm just telling that they're translated in 41 languages. That's unbelievable. Und jetzt kommt aber das Beste. Alle 30 Sekunden verkauft sich im deutschsprachigen Raum eines seiner Bücher. Er gibt nicht vor, sondern regt zum Nachdenken an. Er bringt den Leser dazu, sich selbst und sein Leben zu hinterfragen und weiterzudenken. Und er stellt die Frage, bist du glücklich mit dem, was du machst? Und ich habe heute die große Ehre, John Strelecky im Podcast zu haben. Welcome to the Bewohnerfrei podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Do you speak a little German? Did you get anything I was just saying, or?
You know what's funny is I can pick some of it up in the written. It's harder for you the hearing it, but I'm starting to get a little more and more. So it's actually one of my goals is to get a bit more comfortable in hearing it and understanding what's going on.
Yeah, and talking about written things, I went to a bookshop today where I was looking if my book is even in the shelves, and there was one. And then, of course, there is this big place in the bookstore where all your books were since months and years. And the first one I read actually was Big Five for Life.
Okay.
And, I'm so thankful for you for having read this book because it opened my eyes, and I'm in the very privileged position of writing down that I've written down my Big Five and also finding a job with the Big Five.
That's
and here's
awesome.
my first question to you. How did you find yours? I mean, probably you've heard that question so many times, but how did you find yours and then put it on paper?
Yeah, so for me, I had this experience where I was in my early 30s and I was strongly entrenched in my career. I was very good at what I did. I was well paid for what I did. And I actually worked for a pretty good company. So it wasn't a situation which I've also been during my life where I worked for a horrible boss and a horrible company. But this was actually a good company and I enjoyed what I did. But, you know, there's that gap between you enjoy what you do and you really love what you do. And that's the place that I was in. And I looked at the people that were 10 years older than me, and I thought, if I continue where I'm going, this is going to be my life. And I decided I couldn't do that. And so I left it all to go backpack around the world for a year, which was something that I dreamed about since I was a child. You know, I've always been fascinated by other cultures and other people, and more than anything else, by adventure, you know. And so I left it all to go backpack around the world. And that's what really set my life on a whole new direction. And it was through that experience that I found myself asking these big questions, you know, and that's what led me to mine.
If we go back to that job where you were seeing people who are 10 years older than you are, or you were, I believe many people have that. I mean, they do have that feeling, but in my experience, most people, they just settle, you know, they become afraid of doing something new. They're afraid of packing their bag. And you did it. And I mean, that's probably the biggest difference, just doing it, right?
Yeah. And I'll be the first to tell you that for years before that, I was the guy who was afraid. You know, I remember much earlier. So when I was in my sort of early 20s and really my life was at some of the lowest points of my entire human history. And I remember someone told me, go watch this guy on a stage. He took me, and I had never been to anything relating self-development or any of that. And so I'm watching this guy on the stage, and he's talking about empowering yourself and how your life can be different. And I just remember sitting there thinking, yeah, easy for you to say, buddy. You're a best-selling author, and they're paying you a fortune to stand on your stage. So no wonder you can say how easy it is to follow your dreams, right? And what I realize now, obviously many, many years later, is it's not about waiting until it's proven to you that then you start doing it. It's actually the opposite. And it took me a lot of years to overcome my own personal insecurities to deal with that. But it's about getting started and then it follows. You can't wait until it comes to you and then you're going to start believing.
Was there a certain point where you just had enough? I mean, did that build up? And was there a situation where you said enough is enough?
Yeah. So it's funny that you're asking me this, and I can actually laugh thinking about it now, because at the time it was it was not funny at all. But now reflecting back, it is funny. What my dream was to be a pilot. I wanted to be a pilot, and the reason I wanted to be a pilot was because I knew two things about pilots. I knew that they had a lot of time off, and I knew that they had free airline tickets. Like, this is the worst reason ever to pick a career, right?
Right.
But this is what I knew, and that seemed like a much better choice than the other ones that I was looking at. And so I spent all my life savings. I started working since I was 12 years old. I'd spent all my life savings going to university, getting a degree. And when I got out of university, I had a job where I was flying small planes in the middle of the winter. And I would fly over the traffic routes, and I would call it in, I'm over for Route 146, and we got back right in.
Oh, for news channel?
Yeah. This is way back in the day.
We have that in Germany. In America, it's always news channel where the traffic is.
Yes, exactly. And now, I'm sure now they have sensors, nobody's up there flying. But back in the day, this is what they did, right? So anyway, my life consisted of, I would have to get to the airport before 6 a.m. because, it's the traffic routes, right? So you got to be up super early. And then I would go work as a waiter at lunchtime. And I was so poor that the only thing I could afford, when you worked as a waiter, they would give you all the food you could eat for lunch for free because you were waiting tables. I kid you not. I would order 6 things off the menu, and I would power load because that was like my meal for the day. And then I would go back and I would fly the afternoon route, and then I'd drive home. So you asked what was the defining day. So the defining day for me was I found out that I could no longer be a pilot. I had a heart condition that had never been diagnosed before. Okay. But I still had my job as a waiter, right? And so here I am after working since I'm 12 years old. All my life savings have been spent on this dream, which has now been yanked away from me through no fault of my own. I have this crummy job at a waiter that is at a place 50 minutes from my house because I took a job that was close to the airport. And now I'm not even a pilot. I'm driving there in the middle of February. It is freezing out, right? I mean, absolutely freezing. And my car stops, and I'm about 1.5 miles from the exit where I have to get off the highway, right? And I pull over on the side of the road, and steams, all kinds of stuff's coming out from underneath my hood. I kid you not. I open the hood, and all of this smoke, everything is coming out there, and I'm like, oh my God, my car is on fire. Like, I have got to put this fire out. And so I race around to the back, and I open up the hatch, and I'm looking like liquid, right? Do I have water, anything? I grabbed the very first canister of liquid I can find.
What was it?
I run around to the front of the car. I throw it on. It's antifreeze. Antifreeze, which is like a significant portion of alcohol, right? I'm not kidding you. My car goes from being like smoking to an inferno.
Burning.
Yes. So I now have a car that is like billowing flames, right? And I'm literally inches off the side of the expressway. So if you've ever stood that close to an expressway, every time a truck goes by, it feels like you're going to get thrown.
Right.
So all of these trucks and these cars are coming racing by, and I'm like, vroom, vroom. And everybody's honking like to let me know that my car is on fire, as if I would miss that somehow when I'm standing right in front of it, right? And so suddenly my head kicks in, and I'm like, oh my God, your car's on fire. You just dumped antifreeze on it. You need dirt. Because I was thinking flour, like they tell you if you're in the kitchen, you got grease fire. I'm on my hands and knees in February trying to scrape together dirt, rocks, whatever I can. And I do this like 20 times. I'm throwing this on the engine block. And finally,
nobody helped you? Nobody stopped?
Nobody helped me. And this was before a cell phone, so it's not like I could call someone. And I was too poor by then to afford a tow anyway. So I kid you not, like 20 times of this. I have no gloves, I have no hat, and freezes well below freezing. Finally, the fire goes out on the car. And my only choice is to turn the ignition and see if I can get it to start so I can drive the 1.5 miles to work.
Good idea.
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, that's really smart. This thing will probably blow up halfway there, right? I literally drove it the 1.5 miles down the exit ramp, and I coasted into the parking lot at work, and I worked that job that day. And I said, this is it. Something's going to change. Like, I cannot do this anymore.
Do you believe in signs of the universe, stuff like that? I mean, that's that's pretty dramatic, showing you something is burning or not working.
Yeah. Here's my take on that. So I'm not a super religious guy, only because I don't like attaching labels to things almost in anything.
Yeah.
But I definitely believe that there is a bigger game at play than just you get your 28,900 days, you die, and that's it, right? And so I am fascinated with what is the algorithm behind the scenes that we get glimpses of, but we don't necessarily think about on a daily basis. And what is the way that works, and what is the way we can apply that in our life? And to your question, I firmly believe that part of the human experience is choosing the challenges, not all of them maybe, but some of the challenges you will have before you arrive. And then you get here and you're a baby and you don't remember what the challenges are, but they keep coming up, right? And at first it's kind of like a little tap on the shoulder. Hey, buddy, remember I'm the challenge you picked, right? But if you don't deal with it, at some point you're sitting in this way with your car on fire, and it is telling you it is now that you are going to have to deal with this. So yeah, and this is very empowering, because what it tells me is, listen, you don't have to wait till the car is on fire. Like,
right.
You can deal with this stuff much earlier, and when you do, it's a lot easier. So,
right.
Yeah.
When I read Big Five for Life, I had this picture in my mind of thinking about a big puzzle, which life is. And if you pick the right spots for you, pretty much the big five, then you don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to try putting one of the puzzle pieces in if they don't fit, because then you have this perfect match, so to say. And even with your story, you just said that this traveling, free airline tickets, you already had this inside that you wanted this traveling and freedom. So it was already one of the big five of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My issue is not that I didn't have a sense of awareness about what I wanted to do. My issue is that I assigned it. I mean, it was the only path I understood at the time, but I assigned it to the wrong direction. Because the truth is, what I know now is there's like 1,000 million ways that you can be out there traveling, have flexibility and freedom in your schedule, do something that you love and get paid very well for it. At 21, I had no clue.
Right. And I also, while I'm listening to you, hear that you didn't grow up with a golden spoon, right? I mean, if you started working when you were 12, is it okay to ask you how you grew up, and when was your first contact to personal development at all? Because many people are always telling me, there's some children, they have parents that tell them how to become successful, but most people I interview didn't have that past. They had some difficulty to overcome first.
And it's interesting. So when you get past the obstacles and you can look back, you realize that, and don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily want a life of perpetual obstacles, nor would I wish that on anyone else.
Right.
But what I do realize is that the obstacles sometimes prepare you for something that is coming later. And so the fact that I started working when I was 12 ingrained in me a tremendous work ethic. I work tremendously hard at what I do. If I commit to something, my philosophy is either do it right or don't do it at all, right? And so this was something that I ingrained early in my life because I had to.
Right.
It was out of necessity. But this has been a gift of untold proportions as it relates to the rest of my life, because I'm willing to work hard at something that I believe in. And I firmly believe that in this world, if you're willing to work hard at something that you believe in, good things will follow, right?
Right.
So in that case, it was kind of lucky that I went through that part of my life because I learned that skill early on, as opposed to someone else may grow up in the lap of luxury, no responsibility, no worries, no cares. But they may find it very hard to delve into something and give it all they've got, right?
And I find even many rich kids, so to say, coming from the elite universities, being completely unhappy. It's not a guarantee for happiness, right?
Well, and I love asking these types of questions. So why is that? Because what's fascinating here in the U.S., you hear this all the time. Like, I want my kid to go Ivy League. I want him to go Stanford. They've got this list of these top tier schools. But you're exactly right. If that was the only criteria for living an amazing life, then everybody out of these universities would be living an amazing life. And I'll be the first to tell you, and you just seconded it, it's not the case. No. That is not the guarantee of happiness. It's not the guarantee of success in any way that you define success, which is awesome, because then it challenges to say, well, what would be the guarantee? Mm-hmm. What would be maybe even a better step to ask and then follow that would help line us up on a path that is going to get us closer to that earlier on. And you talked about it earlier. To me, it's awareness about the things that really are your personal big five for life. These are the 5 things that you most want to do, see, or experience in your lifetime before you die, so that you could say your life was a success. And I think the earlier you can start in life thinking of that way, the greater chance you have of living a truly spectacular life.
Right. Do you believe that sometimes, if we call them angels or people who are just our mentors, they ask us these questions? They don't say Big Five for life, but I have in my life, many people told me by my Big Five, but I didn't see them myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that your experience as well, that other people sometimes know more?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm turning 50 this year, and turning a certain age doesn't guarantee you wisdom by any stretch. You can meet you can meet kids who are 6 that have the wisdom that far exceeds someone who's 76, right?
Sometimes more, yeah.
Sometimes more, yeah. But I do think that if you are a thinking person, that as you continue to go through the human experience, you do become a bit wiser in the way that things work, or you at least have a different perspective if you're not wiser. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's valuable to have someone who is maybe 10 years, 15 years down the path who can say, you know what, hey, listen, I know at the moment this feels really stressful, but trust me, it's going to be okay. Yeah. And here's why it's going to be okay, Yeah.
What was your first job you talked about, and why did you have to work so early? I didn't get that so far.
Yeah, so my first job was doing physical labor. I did everything from carrying concrete blocks when they were breaking up road construction, to painting houses, to lawn care, to anything that is basically physical labor.
Right.
And I am, you can't really tell in the video, but I'm an athletic guy, but I'm not a big dude, right? So carrying concrete blocks at the age of 12 is not really the job that I am physically designed for. And, but again, that taught me the value of working super hard. And had I been smarter back then, what I would have learned is, listen, you're a creative guy. Mm-hmm. And you were born with a pretty good set of thinking skills, and you're better tapped to do creative thinking work than you are to do carrying concrete blocks, Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what I love I love that about the work that you do. I've seen the videos and the way that you impact an audience, and for your podcast.
Thank you.
And I love that's the stuff that I do my best to do as well in regards to inspiring younger people, because the sooner that you can get these awarenesses, then you don't have to be doing a lot of this crazy, stupid stuff that I look back now, and you don't have to endure a lot of the struggles that I went through.
Yeah.
Because it can be done easier. It can be done more efficiently than I did.
And while you were growing up, were there people coming to you saying, you're very creative, you should maybe start writing? Were there voices telling you that, or?
Not that I can recall. I was part of the structure, the system as far as academia went. And, your greatest success in academia is showing up on time and getting your work done. And I don't think creativity was really praised or reinforced. It was a lot about regurgitating information, and I don't really know when. It's a great question, and I have to give that some thought, but I don't know when the first time someone else said to me something that really clicked in my head, like, oh, maybe I could do that.
Because I sometimes believe some people are waiting for that person to come. I mean, a book can be that tool, but if you have somebody telling you, hey, wake up, there's so much more in you. I just want you to see it, right? I mean, that's pretty much the job we are doing right now. You in a far bigger scale, telling people, yes, there is more if you're willing to pay the price.
It's funny because as you were describing that, I was thinking there was a guy that was a friend of my dad's, and we used to go on these outdoor camping trips and that kind of stuff. And it was always a long drive. It was like a 4 or 5 hour drive to get there. And this guy, he was funny, and he was always very, he treated me as an adult. I was the kid. It was always my dad and his cousins and then a couple of his friends, and they were probably in their 40s, I guess. They seemed so old back then, but now I'm older than they probably were. And I was just the kid, and I got to go. But I noticed the way that he brought humor into situations. And I noticed the way that he would take people with very different and very intense opinions. And he had this rhythm of, he wouldn't just say, no, you're wrong, but he would say, that's interesting. From my perspective, I look at it a little bit, and he knew how to get his point across without being confrontational.
Right.
And I suppose even at a young age, I was picking up on that even though I maybe was thinking different with my creativity, that I didn't have to say, no, you're wrong to anybody. I could have a conversation that was worthwhile for both parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I was even picking it up at that point. I don't know.
When you left that event where the speaker was speaking in front of the audience, how were you back then? Were your filters open? No.
Yeah. I thought I think, you know what it is. And I've seen this in other people too. And I recognize it because it was where I was at in my life, that when you come from the place that I came from, your self-confidence is so low, and it's actually not self-confidence. It's your self-esteem that's so low, because I had self-confidence in certain things. I could play sports exceptionally well. I was a good student. But my self-esteem, where I placed myself in the hierarchy of humanity, was at the bottom, right? And when your self-esteem is very low, it's uncomfortable to admit that you don't have the answers. And when you see someone who is successful, it's at a cellular level, it's uncomfortable for you.
Right.
So no, I was not open at all. As a matter of fact, I walked out of there thinking, this isn't for me. I don't belong. Actually, and this is a sure sign when it's a self-esteem issue. You feel, I don't belong here, right? And
incredible that is coming from you. I mean, you are the author for personal development worldwide, and that there was a time where you were sitting there thinking that I can't achieve that. I don't belong in that industry. And now kind of like you rule the industry, right? But yeah, I think that gives hope to many people listening.
I do hope so, because I have to, it takes me like a mental shift to actually put myself back in that space to remember what I was thinking and the ways that I was thinking. And honestly, I love being out of that space. So it's very rare that I would ever, it's only really when I do interviews and someone asks me really good questions like you're asking. And because I want to give a heartfelt answer, I place myself back there and I can remember it. And it's so cellular. So I get it that it's hard to overcome that, right? But I will tell everyone, and I close actually the Das Café book with this line, and it's written straight from the heart, that having taken a look through the other side of the gate, right? Through the hole on the other side of the gate, I would never go back. Right. And so I guess what I want to share with anybody who's listening who feels that way, that who am I to belong? I don't belong. I have this low, and when you're honest, you can admit it's self-esteem. You don't feel like you belong, that you do belong, that you have something to offer. Everybody's got something to offer.
Right. I mean, your main characters in your book are the people you talk to. I mean, that's what I wanted to ask you next. Who if you met these characters and you put the story around it, because they were pretty much people you met on the way, right? They were just telling you stories, and you looked behind the curtain of their life. Is that a right interpretation?
It is. And these examples now are more around us than ever before, because we have access to untold amount of YouTube videos, untold amount of podcasts. You can get online and search for someone's story who is interesting, and you can find out their entire life history, right? In a day, Amazon will deliver their book to you if you want to read their biography. So unlike any time, I believe, in human history, there is an opportunity to take yourself from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. Right. Because I'm a firm believer it's not about, and people hear me say this all the time to the point maybe of nausea, but it's so much changed my life and continues to influence my life that I think it's important. It is not about how do I go from where I am to where I want to go. It is about who has already gone from where I am to where I would like to go.
Right.
And if you learn everything you can about the path that one person or a group of people took, it's like looking at a roadmap of how do I go from Berlin to Frankfurt? Like all you got to do is follow the steps, right?
Yeah.
When you know that, it's like 1,000, 1,000,000 times easier than when you're staring at the blank piece of screen of life and saying, I don't even know how to begin.
Right. How did you handle your surrounding when you said, I'm going to pack my bags, I'm out of here? Yeah. How did your friends react? Because that's another thing where I have a lot of people struggle with. They come to our events, they're completely excited, they write down their goals, they want to be self-employed, they want to write the book of their life. And then they come home and their friends are telling them, no, don't do it, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
How was it with you when you packed?
Yeah, so I heard the same word so often that it was unbelievable. And I would imagine so many people hear this same word when it's an entrepreneurial venture or whatever. And the word was, that's crazy. Like that, nobody does that. I heard that a lot too. John, that's crazy. Nobody does that. Given where you're at in your career, that's just, again, crazy. That's crazy. Nobody does that at this stage of their career. Like, you're highly respected in what you do. Why would you do that now? Right. And the other one is, this is the one I love now because I realize now the insanity of it. John, you're just 20 years away from retirement.
Oh my God. That's painful.
What? 20 years away from retirement. I'm going to sit in this world for this environment, 20 more years. But and I laugh about it now, but listen, I'm not laughing about it from the perspective of anybody who's listening is foolish. I'm laughing about it because I know what it is like on the other side of this story. And when you're on the other side of this story, and I know everybody who's listening can get there if they choose to, that you too will be laughing, thinking to yourself, oh my God, I was willing to almost give up 20 more years of that, which really brought me zero joy compared to this, which is awesome.
Right. And then you did pack, then you left. Who was the first character you met on your journey who influenced you a lot and who might even be a character of your book?
Yeah, because
I know all of them, at least, I mean, as a reader.
So it's, I would say, like, you're exactly right in terms of the nuances of the characters. And I remember there's one girl that stands out. I met a girl who had been on the road for 5 years, and she was a dive instructor. And so I met her in Thailand. She would go to cool places that had spectacularly clear water. And I'm a water guy, man. I love being in a kayak or a canoe or snorkeling or diving. So she was a dive instructor. She would go to wicked cool places that had spectacular places to dive. She would dive instruct for 6 weeks. She would save all her money, and then she would go travel for 3 or 4 months, always ending at another spectacular place to be a dive instructor.
What a life.
Right. And she'd been doing this for 5 years, right? She was in her probably late 20s. And I just remember thinking to myself, you're like my hero. You know, I had no sense that was even an option when I was 22 or 23 years old, right? And then there's another guy that comes up there, I remember. So the other end of the spectrum, he was in his late 60s, and he had already been in over 70 countries, as I recall. His name was Gustav, and he was from Australia. And he used to own a restaurant, and he sold his restaurant, and he went off to go see the world. And he was backpacking around the world. He would do 6 months away backpacking. And after he had been gone for like a year, he came back for the first time, and he went to go see the people who bought his restaurant because he was still on good terms with them, right? And they're like, well, dude, what are you going to do while you're here in town? He's like, I don't know. I kind of need some money. And they're like, why don't you wait tables at the restaurant? You know this place inside and out. This is what he does. He goes and travels for 6 months, spends all his money, comes back and waits tables at his old restaurant. So now he has zero responsibilities with the restaurant, which is why he wanted to sell it, right? But he loves it. He loves the clientele, banks all his money, out he goes for 6 more months, you know? So what I love about both these stories is the willingness to look at life from a field of possibilities that are perhaps different than the ones everybody is doing around you.
Right.
And this is what I learned. When you're sitting in a cubicle in an office building, saying to yourself, if only I could talk to someone who is out there traveling around the world, it would give me hope about traveling around the world. It's not going to happen because the people who are out there traveling around the world are out there traveling around. That's why they're not in an office, right? Because what I realized after 7 days on the road is that there are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who are out there backpacking around the world. I just had never met any of them because I wasn't out there backpacking around the world. And this applies to your dream of being an entrepreneur. You want to be an entrepreneur? Go hang out with entrepreneurs, right? You want to open a flower shop? Go hang out with flower shop owners.
Yeah, that's what I always say, because of the mirror neurons in your brain, right? They need the influence of people who made it. When did you have the feeling of belonging to that new life of yours? Because I can imagine it takes a while to. At the beginning, we're all like wowed of that experience, but understanding that now is you. That's another thing.
7 days.
7 days.
7 days. I remember writing in my journal after the 7th day that before I left, there were 1,000 reasons why this made no sense whatsoever. I've been on the road for 1 week, and not one of those reasons is true anymore.
So pretty much your brain did what everybody's brain does. It tells you stories that will never happen, makes you afraid.
Yes, exactly. And you know, so why, you ask yourself, why did everybody think I was so crazy? So much of their crazy terminology was built around you're going to die, right? Like it was all around fear. You're going to be injured. You're going to die. You won't find food, whatever.
Right.
None of that came true. None of it even remotely came true, right?
Yeah. and then your friends tell you, oh, there's that guy in Brazil that never came back, right? It's like, oh, right. My God.
Yes. And so now, because it's funny, you know, you talk about like where you were before and where you were after. When I was the guy who had very low self-esteem and had no worldly experience, I would have heard the story of the one guy in Brazil who never came back. And I would have thought, well, that'll be me. I'm not going, right? But now I hear that story because people tell me that stuff still. And I hear that story and they say, yeah, one guy disappeared. He never came back. And I said, yeah, I know. And 5 million people went out and had the time of their life and are now back home.
Oh, so, hallelujah.
What can I tell you?
So the journal that you start writing, the books are based on these journals, or how did that happen? I mean, because again, let's talk about the business side for a moment. There are millions of people traveling from Bali to Brazil, everywhere. They're all having these great experiences, but you wrote books about it, and they sold worldwide millions.
Yeah.
How sorry to say, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, well, so what was wonderful about the experience is I came back. So I'll tell you, I'll try and shorten the story, but I came back from the experience of backpacking around the world. No job, had spent a lot of money, and didn't have any specific way in which I was going to sort of get myself back on track financially. But honestly, I had the time of my life. I viewed the world and my existence from such a completely different perspective. I was fearless in coming back. We can talk about that if you remind me a story of how I overcame my fears. It happened on a train in China. And so I came back from this and I had gotten an email from a guy that I used to consult with saying, hey, if you're back in the country, I need a consultant, right? And consulting was what I used to do. I was a management consultant. I would help companies make more money. That's what I was good at. That was my thought processes were well aligned for that. And so I was like, oh, well, where is it? I just came back. I have no money. And he's like, it's in Detroit, Michigan. And this was in February, right? Now, I'm a warm weather guy. That's all I do is warm weather because I hate
and I can tell you one thing. It's cold there.
Yeah.
Because I studied there in the winter.
Oh my God. Where did you studied in Michigan?
UFM.
Okay. Yeah.
So in Ann Arbor. Oh my God.
Yeah. This is like, I don't know. It's like lower level Siberia. It is freezing cold, right? And so I was doing this assignment. It lasted for I don't know how long. And I was coming back on my last day of the assignment. Now, keep in mind, these are the two worlds I had. I had backpack around the world, which is a lifelong dream, right? And then back to consulting, working with people whose greatest concern is how do I sell one more widget after I had just spent months interacting with people who literally make $5 a month and are still happy. And so it was just like, oh my God, worlds colliding.
Right.
So I'm on the plane. I have no book because I finished my book before I got on the plane, and I'm sitting there and they announced that we were going to have to de-ice the plane. Right?
Which takes a long time.
This could be hours, right? Exactly. And I don't know why, but I found myself writing out a speech. And I remember thinking to myself that I was going to give it to like high school students for some reason. And I was not a speaker, or a speechwriter.
Looking back, where do you think that came from? That
I don't know. It's out there, the universe. Yeah. I mean, affix your term for it. Call it God, call it the universal consciousness, the collective consciousness, the universe.
It just had to be. You had to write it that.
Yeah. For some reason, and I'm a traveler. Like you never get on an airplane without a book, ever.
No.
These days it's with your iPad or iPhone, but back then it was a book, right? Because you never know when you're going to be sitting there de-icing on the tarmac for 3 hours. And but I'd finished my book and I was running late for the flight. I didn't have time to get another one. And so, yeah, it's like all the connection points of the universe coalesced perfectly for this moment. And I wrote out this speech. And I got up the next morning and I thought there's so much more to it than that. And it's not just for high school students. And I sat at a computer and over the course of 21 days had this stream of conscious typing experience, which is what became word for word Das Café. And here we are now, 40 plus countries, 40 plus languages and books all over the world. So it's not like it was a master plan. I didn't pack my backpack, leave on the flight and say to myself, off for a year, going to come back, write a book, it's going to become a bestseller. None of that, right? All I knew was step one, which is I can't keep doing the path that I'm doing because 10 years from now, I'm going to be even more miserable than I am now. I'm going to take the first step in the direction of what I think is the right path and see what happens. right?
So you didn't even know you were a good writer before that?
No.
That's incredible. But you just said something amazing. You sat down and then it kind of like rolled out in front of you. It just happened.
Yeah. And so this, to your question, you asked a question and I've now like tangented off 1,000 different places. But I think the takeaway is that sometimes all you have is a glimmer, right? You don't have a full plan. And this is where you have to get beyond the self-doubt. Because I had spent the year backpacking around the world and finding food and shelter and getting around in countries where I didn't speak the language, I didn't know the cultures, I didn't know the customs, you tend to rely on your instincts. And in order for you to rely on your instincts, you have to get beyond this self-doubt piece.
Right. Because
it's all you've got.
Right.
And then coming back from that for a year, I had this whole new sense of self about what I was capable of. So I guess my recommendation for people is, for me, it was traveling the world, and that did it for me. And I think it literally would do it for anyone. But if that's not your thing, then find what is your thing. Right.
It's just an example. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and maybe it is doing something entrepreneurial. Maybe it's, I don't know. I could come up with 1,000 different examples, but everybody's is different. But I think the big takeaway from that is when you allow yourself to challenge yourself in the direction that you think you want to walk,
right,
you're going to walk out of that experience with a whole new sense of self-confidence. And that is what allows you to sit at a computer for 21 days and let it flow through you when logically nothing about that makes any sense whatsoever, when you're not even a writer.
Got it. Did you find a publisher right away?
No, so this shows you just how completely clueless I was, right? Which can be so useful.
Like it, yeah.
Which can be so useful at times. And so I had no idea what I was doing. But after the 21 days were done, I printed it out, I put it on a shelf. I went back and read it like a week later, and it looked like a book. It felt like a book. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to turn it into a book. What's the path to do that, right? Well, and we were talking before about how sometimes you can get asked to do things which prepare you for something else. So all of my years as a consultant prepared me to walk into a business I knew nothing about, and in 72 hours be able to walk in front of C-level people and pitch a really good idea, right?
You were prepared.
Yeah. And so I looked at this and I said, I think this is supposed to be a book. I don't know anything about books. I gave myself 72 hours, and in 72 hours, I knew more about making a thing a book than probably 99% of the people on the planet, right?
Right.
And I ended up opening up my own publishing company because that was the fastest route. And I think it was literally like 8 weeks later, I had it on Amazon. And in the first year, I had taken – and then I made my own website. I didn't know how to make a website, and it was horrible. It was beyond horrible, right? It didn't matter.
Before you are ready, is that another thing you would say? Start doing things before you feel they're perfect?
Yeah, if you wait until you're perfect, forget it. It's a lost cause. You can't write.
Saying that in a German podcast, because most Germans want to be perfect.
And I get that. And that, to me, if I was to look back at my life, that came from self-doubt. That came from self-esteem issues. I used to operate between a spectrum of a fear of failure and a fear of success. And this comes actually, if we tie it back into the Chinese story, you'll know the whole story behind it. But basically what happens there is you don't want to put yourself out there because you don't want to look foolish and you don't want to fail, right? And so that keeps you in this narrow band of fear of failure and fear of success. And therefore you're not willing to start the walk until you've got it all figured out.
Right.
But I'm telling you, I put together probably the world's worst website, and it still sold copies to people in 24 different countries. We took orders from people in 24 different countries, and the book was only in English. And I had no idea how people in these countries were hearing about it, right? And this, I think, is where the higher calling comes into play.
Right, got it.
Clearly, this is the universe or God or whatever your word of choice is saying, hey, dude, you're walking the path that you were supposed to be walking, and we're just telling you, good job, buddy. Keep up the good work. Right?
Write more books.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could not be getting better signals that you're doing something that you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
So, you asked me before, was there anybody who said when I was younger, like, hey, you're going to make it? I can't say that there was someone that stands out, but I will tell you that these experiences when I was starting on this path were like 1,000 people a day patting me on the back saying, keep going, buddy, keep going. You're doing a good job.
Interesting. And everything else you said before just fell into place. The work ethic, the travel, the overcoming thoughts and fear. That's just incredible. Now I really want to hear the China story.
Okay, first I have to tell you, because you reminded me of something else, which is, so I want to say that I think a lot of times in life we think, okay, so now I'm on the path, now I'm cooking with gas, it's going to be easy from here on out. I have been rejected by over 200 publishers worldwide.
No. For that book?
Yeah.
For Café am Rande der Welt or for Big Five for Life?
For a café. I got a rejection letter from a publisher while the book was on the bestseller list.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So the manuscript had been sent, right? And it had sat in a pile for a year or whatever. Meanwhile, the book had been published, was on the bestseller list. The person finally got around to reading the manuscript, sent me a letter saying, I don't think anybody's ever going to buy this. And they didn't even look to see that it was already a bestseller. So
one thing I would like to ask right at this moment, how did your ego react at this moment? I mean, that's a big thing for many men.
Yeah.
Like they get angry and they're just like, okay, then just you know the word
No, yeah. So it was very tempting to send a letter back saying, hey, dumbass, right? Mm-hmm. Don't you realize that this is, but that's just ego. Right. I mean,
did you lose that on your journey a little bit too? Like meeting all these people and
yeah, I mean, I was able to recognize in myself, like, don't get me wrong, I am 1,000 miles away from perfect in terms of these moments, right?
Right.
I get impacted by this stuff just like I think most people get impacted by it. But the place that I think we all have an opportunity to grow to, and this is what I strive for in myself, is I can feel the reaction, but I'm able to step outside of the reaction and watch myself have the reaction. Right. And from out here, watching my brain have the reaction or my ego have the reaction, I can then operate from a place of higher consciousness and say, what is the real reaction I would like to have from this? And here's what I learned in that moment. The real reaction was, until I take the time to write a letter of equal length to every single person who has ever sent me an email that said your book changed my life, I am not going to write a letter to that guy. Right?
Beautiful. Yeah. Amazing.
Because you are never.
I think he's having a bad time anyway, after.
Yeah. Right. You're never, no matter what, this is what I've learned. No matter what you do, no matter how pure the intentions, no matter how good the service, the product, whatever you offer, there's going to be like 5% of the population that hates you. Right.
Don't tell me you have haters.
Oh, absolutely.
Who can hate this book? It's just perfect.
So this is what I've learned, is that no matter who you are, no matter what you do, no matter how good your intentions are, there is a certain percentage of the people that are going to hate what you do. And it's not you. It's like you said, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they have a low esteem issue, right? So I try to, again, from a higher consciousness perspective, I try to think back to me at 21, sitting in that audience going, yeah, easy for you to say, dude, right?
Right.
And maybe that's where they're at.
Office. See how that looks like, right?
Yeah. So maybe they've gone through a path of life that is leaving them in a place that they're very vulnerable. And so someone is writing in a book that, hey, there's other options to this state of misery. And they're like, yeah, screw you and the ship you rode in on. You don't know my story, right?
Right.
So I try and approach it from a higher consciousness. It doesn't always work, but I try and approach it from a higher consciousness perspective and say, okay, right? But I think this is important because, again, whether you open up a flower shop or you have a podcast or you decide to try and make it as a professional athlete or as a school teacher, this is the sad reality. There's going to be a percentage of the people that are doing their very best to tell you that you suck and you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, and they're going to do everything they can to make you fail.
Yeah.
I'd rather know that
they are pulling many people back down, right? But I do think it is connected to fear. Coming back to that fear China story, many people are really in fear of showing the real them because they're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of not being loved. And I think if you have an experience that shows you real fear or what fear really is, it makes it easier. So many people should pack their bag and just look into the world a little more. Yeah,
if you can do it. I mean, if you can get yourself to that point, it's a great point to be. And you said something earlier, and then I'll tell the China story that you asked me to tell. You mentioned a great thing, which is if you have good people around you, right? Supportive people, encouraging people, that it's worth listening to them because they do see things in you that you will maybe not see in yourself. And And although I can't specifically recall an instance where someone was sort of that pat on the back when I was going through these younger times, I'm sure there were people, and I'm sure I was just too closed off to hear it.
Right.
And so I guess my thought would be for someone who's listening, and maybe this is the first step. Someone told them listen to this podcast, or they were drawn to your podcast, and they're thinking, well, I don't know about this, that allow yourself to listen to those people that are good people around you saying there's something in you that is really worthwhile, because it's true. It really is true. They wouldn't tell you if they didn't believe it.
Right. It's so beautiful that you say that, because I was very bad at school when I was little, and I had this one school teacher. I also wrote a book, and a big part of that is that school teacher, she just said there's more in you. And that sentence changed a lot. I thought I'm dumb. Yeah. I had only C's and D's, and I thought I'm just stupid. Yeah. And she just looked at me and she said, no, you're not. I see something in you. And then I had B's just because of one person saying something, right?
Wow.
It's incredible what other people can do.
I mean, think about that from a parenting perspective. For anybody who's listening who is dealing with kids, certainly a teacher deals with them every day, especially if you're a parent, the importance of that supportive, encouraging language, because it's so easy to let the rest of everyday life impact the way you treat the people that you care about the most.
Right.
I see this all the time. I had this really powerful experience at the airport one time where I watched this mom in the TSA line, and it's hot there, and the TSA people were grumbling and cranky. This is like getting through security. So TSA is here in the US, and getting through security. Okay, and people behind her are grumbling because she's got a lot of kids with her, and she's carrying a baby, and she's trying to deal with the stroller. She was like 4 lanes over, so I was watching it, but I wasn't in a position where I could actually help. And one of her kids dropped something on the ground, and she just laid into the kid. She started yelling at the kid, and I could see this whole moment, and it had nothing to do with the kid. It was just all the rest of this moment of the people and the heat and the stress. And she vented that frustration and anger at the person that she knew would forgive her and that was closest to her. And I think this happens a lot in families. This is the environment I grew up in when I was a kid. And so I guess my thought is everybody who's out there with a kid, remember how powerful just a few words of encouragement can be.
Yeah, unbelievable.
How destructive the other side can be too.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah.
China.
Right. So without going into all the details of the story, because there are family members involved, and out of deference to where they were probably at in their life also, I won't give all the details. But I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I was asked to do a task. And the task was to go find something. Mm-hmm. And so I was sent into a portion of the house, which was an absolute disaster. There was mess everywhere, and I was supposed to find something, and I couldn't find it. And I knew that if I came back without it, that there would be a lot of yelling and a lot of screaming, right? And it was in the basement. And so I went down in the basement. I looked and looked, and I was small. I was only like 5 or 6. I couldn't even see above the shelves and all the rest of this. And I was so petrified. I was so terrified because I knew what would happen when I didn't have it, right? And so I'm on the train in China. I'm on my backpacking trip around the world, right? And in China at 10 o'clock, all the lights go out, and you have nothing to do except sit there. And so I'm laying in this upper bunk, and I clickety-clack, right? And I have all these thoughts coming to my mind. It's all these memories of my life, and it was all times when I failed. And I remember asking myself consciously, why are these the thoughts that are coming to me? But it wasn't from the standpoint, this is really interesting thinking about it. It wasn't like, why are these thoughts coming to me? I actually was curious. I said, why are these thoughts coming to me? It was very much from an inquisitive perspective. And all of a sudden my brain, it was like something in a movie where it's like flash, blurry, and then focusing on this scene. And it was this moment when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I could see myself. It was like I was standing watching the whole scene take place. And I was looking and looking for this thing I was supposed to find, and I couldn't find it. And I could see this little boy cowering at the base of the stairs, crying, right? And it's funny because I get emotional thinking about it, because as much as I'm still that 5 and 6 year old boy inside me. And so I could see him, I could see me cowering at the base of these steps, knowing that if I walked up these steps and I did not have this thing that I was supposed to have, that there was going to be doors slammed, there would be yelling, maybe I was going to get hit, right? But I could not stay down there forever. I had to at some point go upstairs, right? And so sure enough, I walk up the stairs, I don't have the thing, and everything that I knew that was going to happen happened, right? Doors slamming, voices screaming, right? And this planted a seed in me. And this is what I recognized in watching this whole thing unfold while I was on the train in China. I was watching this replay of this moment. What I realized is at that moment that it planted a seed in me that said, do nothing that is going to cause you to fail.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, how bizarre that at age 5 or 6, this seed gets planted. And you were commenting, wow, it's surprising to hear from the outside perspective about something we were talking about earlier. I will tell you that from the outside world's perspective, they would have never guessed that this seed was not only planted in me, but was a huge oak tree that was dominating every essence of my life. Because they would say, wow, you're a good student, you're a good athlete. How could you possibly say that you have this fear of failure and this fear of success? But I will tell you that I only did things up to the point where I was very good. And right at the point where I was going to have to go from very good to pursue greatness, I would stop. I would sabotage my own success. I would switch gears completely and go do something else, right?
Because the seed was already starting to open, right? I mean,
yeah. You want to go from really good to great, you're going to fail because you have got to try something different. What has gotten you to really good is not going to get you to that next level, or you would already be at that next level.
Right. Right.
And that means that you are going to have to try things that you don't know how to do, and nobody tries things that they don't know how to do, and it's perfect every single time on every single thing.
And that's where personal development and your books kick in, because they ask questions.
Yeah.
Pretty much it's a question, because when I think about your books, it's every reader reads their own life while reading that book. It's pretty much, it's just mirroring it.
Yeah.
And it kind of forces you to think about the seeds. It's so interesting because 2 weeks ago, I attended a seminar by Geisha Michael Roach. He wrote this book. It's also a world bestseller. It's called The Diamond Cutter. And he talks about these old 2,500-year-old books in Sanskrit. And it's all about putting seeds, and there will be a time of your life where they're open. If you don't, and that exactly matches that. Your big 5 for life.
Right.
What are yours?
So let me close the story, because as you were saying, it reminded me probably of the most important piece of this story as it relates to fear of failure and fear of success.
Please.
So I'm on the train. I have this realization. I'm watching this whole scene take place. I'm now viewing this memory, but I'm viewing it from the perspective of a 32-year-old man, right? And in that moment, I kid you not, in that moment, every fear disappeared. It was the most profound. Think of all the things that had been associated with that tree, right? Mm-hmm. And everything that I had decided I was afraid of and that I wouldn't do, and all the rest of that. And I kid you not, it was the most amazing thing. But when I had the ability to look at that memory from the adult perspective and realize what it was, that it was not the defining moment that I thought it was in my life.
Right. Because of the realization of it, or why do you think?
It was the realization that I was creating story upon story upon story based on that seed, but the flaw was in the original story. The flaw was in the original seed, right? And so as soon as I took that away, all the rest of the chaos and created stories fell to pieces. They blew to dust instantly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad hearing that most people probably never even dig that deep.
How would we know to, right? I mean, had it not been for this amazing experience of going around the world, I would have never had that experience. I'm sure I could have lived my whole life never having the opportunity to go and experience that moment of childhood from the way that I did on that trip. Yeah.
What do you think you would have done if you didn't go on that trip?
Ooh. I think that so remember the story of the car? I think there would have been another round of that silliness, right? At some point.
More signs.
Yeah, I don't know what it would have been after that one. But
signs.
Yeah. And actually, I hate to think of what it might have been, right? I mean, it would have been something even more drastic because it continues to evolve in an intensity. And so, yeah, there would have been something else that came up with a further degree of intensity that would have challenged my thinking and my questioning.
Incredible.
As I get older, I'm 28. Like I said, I'm almost 50 this year. And so statistically, you get 28,900 days on the planet. And so as you get older, you start to have the days take on a whole new level of importance because you realize, whoa, they're precious. I don't want to give these up. I can't just waste them, right? So maybe what would have happened too is as I would have gotten older, I would have had this new perspective and appreciation for the importance of every day. This is also something that is valuable that comes from looking the 10 years ahead. As a culture, we're sort of divesting. Often we don't see our parents very often. We move to a different city. They live hours away. very fortunate in that my parents now live relatively close to me. I'm fortunate because in part, and this is somewhat sad, but I get to see them age, and I see this is what 75 looks like. This is what 77 looks like. And no matter how good a shape you keep yourself in, it's not nearly as healthy as 55, right? I mean,
Right.
so, or 45 or 25.
And I also listen, there is a higher calling that you have, because otherwise you would not be coming to Germany. Otherwise you would not do this interview, because I assume after selling 800 billion books, you don't have to, you don't have to work anymore, or what's driving you?
What's driving me is it's that 5 or 6 year old kid at the bottom of the stairs. Yeah. What's driving me is the 21-year-old guy with the car on fire. Had it not been for these dramatic cataclysmic shifts in my life, I really don't think I would be very happy. And so I want to do my best to pass it along if I can. I really think that, and maybe it's not for everybody, so I don't want to assume everybody has the same purpose, because I know that's not true. But I think one of my core purposes, there's two that stand out for me. One is to be an adventurer. I don't like doing the same thing, and I like to be out there pushing the limits of my own capabilities.
Is that one of your big five, adventure?
It's travel the world is one of my big five.
World,
And embedded within there is absolutely being an adventurer.
Yeah.
Then I think another, if I was to narrow down to two reasons why I have been given the gift of life, I would say number one is to live out the adventure and do it in as fun of ways as I can. And the second one is to try and make a difference, right? Do my best to at least change the life of one human being while I'm on this planet. And if I can change in a positive way the life of more than one, then keep going,
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, you're changing millions of people's lives. I mean, what a wonderful life, right? Tony Robbins always says we can give back to others when we open our filters. I mean, that's pretty much what you did with your journey, and also when we have the other part of our life pretty much in order, when we feel secure, when we have our body in shape, and all these things are important. Your big five. So that's really interesting to me. You have traveling is one.
Yeah, travel the world is one. So a loving relationship with the people that matter most to me is on my list. Travel the world. To master mind over matter. This goes to a bit of what we were talking about, where the ability to, in any given moment, observe the moment, not just as the participant, but as the observer to the participation, right? The ability to do this has dramatically shifted my perception of what parenting can be like.
Do you have kids by yourself?
I do. Yeah, I have a daughter, and she is 11.
Oh, nice age.
It's been the most amazing life experience. I never thought that I would be a dad, and now that I am a dad, I can't imagine not being a dad. That said, I don't think it is for everyone. People have asked me, like, am I going to miss out? I said, there is no missing out. You can't do everything in life, and so if you want to have a life where you're creating entrepreneurial ventures and doing this kind of thing, and you want a life where you're a great parent at home, but the entrepreneurial ventures are 80 hours a week, but you want to be a great parent at home with your kids, like those two worlds collide. You can't have that. So allow yourself the flexibility to say you can't have everything. So what are the things that are most important to you?
Right.
So that's the mastering mind over matter is that. And I'm fascinated by the field of quantum physics. So that the ability to sort of watch the moment unfolding is certainly one element of that. But there is a whole other spectrum of this in terms of what we are capable of within this shell called a human being. And man, oh man, am I curious about what it would take to continue to ramp up, the abilities in that regard.
It's unbelievable how many similarities. I just started working with Dr. Joe Dispenza. You know that guy? Yeah, he writes a lot about quantum physics and being supernatural. So it's exactly what he on a scientific point of view is looking on. So what are we really capable of? And he says that former cultures, the old Egyptians, the Mayas, the Incas, they had the pineal gland as a holy symbol, and listening to what you're saying, what he is saying, there's so many similarities. Unbelievable. Really unbelievable. You guys should connect.
We should.
I can connect you.
All right, fantastic. Well, and it's a small example of that, because I always look for, so what am I going to do Monday morning? Like if I do a speaking event, I'm always conscious of the fact that, just like you were describing, I don't want people to get all fired up and excited and then go back and Monday morning they're like, oh, what do I do now? Like you can't, like it was just a temporary fix, right? So I try and be very practical when I'm coming up and sharing these ideas. And so to me, here's a very practical example of mastering mind over matter that I think every single human being on the planet that I've ever talked to has this experience where you're walking out of the house and your brain is going, you're forgetting something, right? And you can't remember what you're forgetting, but you know that you're forgetting something. This is the unconscious mind. And when you start to play in this arena of the unconscious, what's wicked cool, and I'll walk very quickly through the spectrum. It starts off as you ignore it, you go to your car, you drive away, and you're 5 kilometers down the road, and you're like, oh, I forgot to bring that package, which is the whole reason I'm driving to this person's house, right? I've been there, totally done that, right? But so that's sort of where it starts off at. But then if you progress, it's okay, you get in the car, you know you forgot something, you can't remember what it is, you get in the car, you start driving, but you're only to the end of the block, and then your unconscious goes, package that you're supposed to bring, you turn around and go back, right? Fast forward, there's like 10 iterations of this, but eventually, the minute you're getting your car keys, your unconscious goes, package, and you go, thanks, unconscious, and you go get the package, right?
True. Yeah.
Now imagine if you could apply this to everything. Every potential business interaction that you have with a stranger where you're trusting your instincts and your intuition more than you can trust the data, right?
Yeah.
This is this whole area of like what's really possible. And I love that. I think that's wicked cool.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I'm going to send you a link. You will love it. I can already tell you. I love giving back because you gave me so much of your time. And if you're interested in that, that will blow your mind what he does.
I would love that.
You
were talking about quantum physics. One of the cool things of this, just to drop a seed out there for people, is that we know that through these really interesting quantum physics studies that there is the field of pure potential. When you get down to the lowest levels, like so subatomic levels, everything is a field of pure potential. Well, what does that mean for us practically? Well, it means that you are at least helping co-create every single moment, that it's not happening to you, but you're helping co-create, or at least you have the capacity to help co-create it. Yeah. Oh my God, this is
being part of that, right?
Yeah, this is a complete game changer in terms of how you can approach your life and the confidence with which you can approach taking something on, knowing that you are helping co-create it as opposed to just being a victim to the reality. Wow, that's a new way of looking at it.
Very powerful. We are not victims. We can create our own reality.
Absolutely. Okay, so the last 2 of my big 5 for life. Number 4 is to inspire as many people as possible through the books that I write and these experiences just like this. You know, it used to be just books on my list, and I realized, wow, yes, but here we can spend an hour having this really cool conversation, and we can inspire millions through that conversation. So books wasn't enough. And then the last one, this is the one that makes everybody laugh so much, but it's to write a song that breaks the top 10 of the pop charts.
What? Really?
Yeah, seriously. I know. It's like, what? How does that fit into any of the rest of this?
Okay, I believe you because you did the book thing. So
yeah. Wait. So, and I have a story to prove why this is so possible. So this is going back years. So this has been on my list for a long, long time. And it's the one that up until now I have not put a lot of emphasis behind. But here's why I love it. Because I was in a bar in Cusco in Peru.
I was there before.
Nice. Okay. So you know the vibe, you know the feel, right? There's like backpackers from all around the world. Everybody's hanging out. There's this total world community. Everybody's getting along. It's like, and all of a sudden this song from Usher came on. This is going back like 10 years. And it was like his big hit. And I don't remember the name of it, but it's got this very distinct hip beat to it. It's like, you know it. The minute it comes on, you know what song it is. And it was really hot at the time. I kid you not. Within 3 seconds, the entire dance floor was filled by people from the world of nations, all collectively having fun and dancing to a song.
Just the Peruvians were a little irritated.
Maybe. But what I loved about that was how cool is that? Like, it takes me 21 days to write one book. But you know, a song is 3.5 minutes. A book is
21 days.
How cool that in 3.5 minutes you can change a state of being. You can inspire people to joy. Like, I just love that, right?
Right.
And so the neatest.
It's really on your big 5.
Yeah, it's really on my list. And the neatest story about like how difficult is it to achieve one of your big 5 for life. So think of all the artists out there who would love to have their song on the radio, right? Play it on the radio. And this is going back years because now they're streaming too. But so I was doing an interview with a German radio station, and the lady and I we were totally having fun, just like we are. We were hitting it off, had a lot of laughs. And she said, well, tell me your Big Five for life. And I told her, and she said, well, I got to number 5. She's like, well, where's the song? I'll put it on the air for you tomorrow.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't have the song. She's like, you don't have the song? But I love the fact that this person who I had only met an hour before was willing to help me achieve a goal that people had worked years, if not decades for, all because it was in the context of this is one of the 5 things that is, one of the things I most want to do, see, or experience in my lifetime before I die. And in that frame of context, she said, I want to help you. I want to help bring this home. I want to be a part of that story. And that is what I love about the Big Five for life, because when people know that it is that significance to you, they will help. They want to help.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I always say, if you tell the world what you want, people will step aside, let you go through, and then form around you, building a group of people supporting your idea. And I see that with every area of life. I still can't imagine it took you 21 days. My friends always make fun. They say it's not a book. It's something you put in the middle of a book. How do you say that? How do you say to that thing in English?
A bookmark. Yeah.
A bookmark. It took me a year. I mean, that's incredible.
That's good supportive friends right there. The ones that'll tell you that. That's got to be your buddies. The ones that you laugh 1,000 times over.
Yeah. I always laugh with them, but they make fun of the book. But that's okay. We sold some copies, which is good. Nice. Next goal, my Big Five is going to be as big as the Café am Rande der Welt.
Nice. Well, and that's it, right? So it's like when I wrote the Café book, I've told you how clueless I was. And I like telling these stories about how clueless I was, because I want people to know that whatever your dream is, whether it's writing a book or driving a race car or something else, that you can start off clueless and it'll still work out okay. As a matter of fact, one of my most powerful personal aha moments, and I quoted this in one of my books, is every expert started off knowing nothing about what they became an expert in.
That's true.
Right? I mean, that's empowering.
Right.
So I like telling these stories of my complete cluelessness, because I hope it gives people hope that, you can start off.
It does give a lot of hope.
So I started off and I had this thing that looked and felt like a book, and I was like, I don't know what size to make it. And I took one of my favorite books of all time, this little book called Illusions by Richard Bach. I took out a measuring stick, I measured it, and I said, okay, it's 7¼ inches tall by 4¼ wide. My book is going to be 7¼ inches tall by 4¼ wide. I open it up. I measure the margins. I'm like, 1/2-inch margins. We're going 1/2-inch margins, everybody. So you can know nothing, but you can start following the path of someone who is successful and imitate it. Oh my God, you're 1,000 miles down the road.
That's so true. Do you know what I did? I put comics in. So because I didn't know if I can fill that many pages, so I made pictures.
Nice. These days you can issue an ebook, right? And nobody wants to read a 200-page ebook. They want to read 40 or 30 or even 10-page ebook. So there's never been a better time to take your genius, whatever it is, and consolidate it down to 10 pages and get it up on Amazon.
Beautiful, beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about when you're coming to Germany. You're coming to the Founders Summit to Wiesbaden, which is a beautiful city.
Is it really? Great.
Sorry?
I didn't know that. That's good to hear.
Yeah, but you didn't know you were coming, or you didn't?
No, I knew I was coming. I didn't know it was a beautiful city.
No, it is. It's really nice. It's going to be the Founder Summit is the 27th and the 24th of April this year, and it's going to be in the Congress Center in Wiesbaden. And you will be speaking along with pretty much the biggest German speakers we have. And then there is you, and you are the main keynote speaker. You're the main act. What can people expect from you? I mean, I could talk to you for probably 10 hours. How do you do events? How do you do a keynote? To which world are you bringing people to?
Yeah, well, so what's interesting is a keynote, like you said, like we've had an opportunity to chat here, and hopefully we'll get to do it again, if not again this year, years to follow. So
wonderful.
A wide spectrum of possibilities. And we can also pick a particular topic, right? I mean, we could throw it out to your listening audience and say, hey, if you enjoyed this and you have specific questions, let us know, and we'll build an entire podcast around that.
That
But a
would be
keynote
wonderful.
is,
I take that as an offer.
yeah, totally. I'd love to do it. A keynote is difficult in that regard, as you know, because depending on how many speakers there are, you have a very tight time slot. Often you don't even get Q&A, which I love to do Q&A.
Yeah.
And so what I do my best to do is to share with people as much of a life-changing experience as I can in 30 minutes. And then I do my absolute best to make myself available afterwards. So I just booked my travel plans, and I told the folks who are helping me with my travel, I said, under no circumstances have me leave that night, because I want to speak and then I want to hang out. I want to talk to people and get to know them. So I have promised that I'll be there before I'm actually on stage, and afterwards we have an area that I'll be signing books. I promise to stick around. And I love that. I love getting a chance to talk to people one-on-one. So if they haven't had a chance to answer their question beforehand, then they can answer it when we have a chance to talk afterwards.
That's absolutely amazing. And the guys of the Entrepreneur University who are holding that event, who built this, I mean, that's an incredible story. There are young people who are bringing the biggest speakers in personal development in the world to Germany, and that everybody's very, very much looking forward that you are coming. And I just actually learned something what you just said, because very often after keynotes I kind of have to leave and go to the next one. When I have sold 800 billion books, I will just stay and hang out and take pictures.
You know, so I think this goes to the balancing. There's always a balancing act in life, right? So when I'm traveling with my family, then I have a counter pull of, you know what, I'm done for the day, and I want to go spend quality time with my family now, because they've been gracious and honorable with their time, and now they'd like some of dad time.
Right.
When I'm traveling on my own and I have more flexibility in my time and I have the opportunity to spend more time, I want to do that. And I guess the reason I like to do it is because this is where you get to fill your tank a little bit. You know, when you're standing in front of an audience and you're giving a presentation, it tends to be out that way, right?
Definitely.
And you can sometimes see, depending on the lighting, you can sometimes see people, but usually it's only the first few rows. You can't see farther into the audience. But there is nothing more humbling and at the same time empowering than having a chance to talk one-on-one with someone who says, I want to tell you my story, and I want to tell you why your book fell off the shelf in front of me when I was walking through the bookstore.
That's so beautiful, yeah.
I mean, that's what keeps you going, because otherwise, it can be draining.
Yeah, wonderful. So one more time, 27th, 28th of April this year, Kongress der Wiesbaden, the Founders Summit, organized by the Entrepreneur University, and we'll put all the information in the show notes below. And if you are listening to this right now and you're not seeing us, go on the website of the Entrepreneur University, because that's like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet you live. And if you're even there to have a chat with people, thank you. That's just amazing. So at the end of our podcast, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time. And it was an absolute pleasure. And one day we will meet in person. And I will. Is there anything you would like to tell to the Germans? Still believe on the good, because there are so many people here that are a little grumpy. Not the people who's listening to this podcast, but is there any message you would like to give at the end?
Well, so two things stand out for me. One is to say thank you, because I can't tell you the number of people who have sent amazing emails and telling their story, and this does it. It constantly validates for me the way in which I spend my time on these projects, because otherwise writing can be a bit isolationist. You know, I'm half a world away, and sure, there's fan base in many different countries, as we talked about.
Right.
But, you know, I tend to be in my office or in my adventure sphere. And so when people take the time to send something, it is not something that I take lightly. And I'm so grateful. And in that same context, when someone cares enough to share a book with someone else, whether they're loaning their copy out, right? Or I had a young lady tell me that she buys copies, and this is what she gives. That when she meets someone and she likes them, sort of like the moment you're saying, if you find a person and you think they're looking for a little pick-me-up, right? And she says, so my pick-me-up is Das Café. I always buy that book, and I'm at 21 copies now, she said. So, you know, there's nothing more humbling again, or is
unbelievable,
gratifying to hear that. And I guess, so in spirit with that, I challenge myself. So what can I do? What can I continue to try and bring to the table that is going to have a positive impact? And so I will share, I've just been allowed to share this because before it was sort of under wraps. But so here is the little good news, teaser news for everybody who is a fan of the Café series, that for a long time I thought that after the second Café book that would be it. I would leave the story there and that was good. Like
in German, it's called Wiedersehen.
Yeah, there you go. And I thought that would be it. And then I started to have little knocks on the door of my head saying it might be time to go back, right? And then I don't know why, but I just sort of kept them at bay, and the knocks got louder and the knocks got louder. And I can officially announce on your show here that for those who enjoyed their time at the Café, that the third Café book will be coming out in October of 2000 this year.
That's incredible. So in Wiesbaden, can you read a page of it already?
I cannot read a page yet, but I will be doing other events over the course of the year. And I'm actually coming to Germany for the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I'll be doing
I will also be there with my new book.
Nice. There you go. Well, we definitely will have to hang out there, if not before. But I'm super excited about this, and I'll tell the second teaser, which I'm probably not even supposed to tell. But in the process of writing book 3, I had these two individuals in mind, and I had in my head as it started to unfold the way in which the dialogues were going to occur, etc. And as it unfolded, I realized that there was more to it than I had first envisioned. And so by the time it was all said and done with writing book 3, I was about halfway done with book 4. And so, and I love this new character in book 3, who we get to know a little bit, and then book 4 will be entirely about her story. So, yeah.
You're absolutely amazing. I just finished the second book. Took me half a year again, and you're already having. So in the after talk, you can give me some tips how I can do that better.
You know, the funny thing about books is it's at the right time. I've had many people tell me, somebody gave me your book and I had no desire to read it, and I left it in my bookshelf, and then 3 years later I picked it up and it was the perfect time in my life. So
that's true. Yeah.
You just
and
never know.
The perfect time of everybody's listeners' life, and I'm going to say that in German one more time so everybody gets it. 27. bis 28.04. The Founders Summit in Wiesbaden mit John. Ihr habt ihn jetzt alle kennengelernt. Kommt dahin. Link ist in den Shownotes. Sicher dir ein Ticket. There was a lot of German. So one more time, thank you so much for taking the time, and I will stop the recording right now and I will just finish in German. Danke euch fürs Zuhören heute, seid wieder so lieb und bewertet die Podcast-Folge. Wäre uns sehr, sehr wichtig, euer Feedback zu wissen. Bis bald. Tschüss, der Tobi.